Hey, Freddy with CJ Pony Parts. It's that time of year again. It's starting to get cold, winter's coming, and we have to decide if we want to put our Mustang away for the winter or take it out and have fun in the snow. And whichever you choose, today we're going to show you how to get your car ready for winter. We're going to start off if you're going to store your car over winter. The very first thing I would recommend doing is give the car a good look over. Look under the hood, the brake, suspension, see if anything needs attention or if anything needs fixed. Also, this is a great time to start projects. If the car is down or torn apart for a couple days or even a couple weeks, it's not going to be that big of a deal. The next thing you're going to want to do if you're going to be storing your car over winter is get a battery tender. If your car is going to sit, the battery can drain, and if it drains too much, it can actually die and you won't be able to start the car and the battery can be ruined. This is going to allow the battery to be charged, and when that nice day comes, you'll be able to start it up no problem. And it's significantly cheaper than replacing the battery. Battery tenders are super easy to install. Just connect the red cable to the positive post on the battery and connect the black cable to the ground. And then plug this into the wall and it'll give your battery a nice constant charge over winter so it won't die. And if you don't have a battery tender already, we have a great selection of battery tenders at cjponyparts.com. When storing your car for long periods of time, the fuel in the tank can actually go bad, making it almost impossible to start or sometimes not able to start at all. So you might even have to drain the tank of all the fuel, and in order to combat this, to make sure your car can start easily and run good when it gets started, is to put some fuel stabilizer in the tank to keep the system protected. The final thing I'd recommend doing if you're going to store your Mustang over winter is get it up on a lift or jack stand so you don't get flat spots on the tire. If the car sits in one spot for a long period of time, you will get flat spots on the tire and it will be very annoying and shaking going down the road. That's all we have for if you're going to store your Mustang over winter. Now we're going to go on if you're going to drive it. Just like storing your Mustang over winter, if you're going to be driving it over winter, the very first thing I'd recommend is give it a good look over. See if anything needs attention or fixed. The last thing you're going to want to do is be wrenching on this thing in the snow with ice and salt melting all over your face. After you've given the car a good look over, you're going to want to make sure that you have the right amount of coolant in your system. You want to make sure you have the proper amount of coolant so your heating and cooling system works properly. If you don't have enough, just simply add some more. Once you have enough coolant, you're going to want to check it with a gauge to make sure it's at the right freezing point. Now this is very, very important because if you don't have the right mixture, the freezing point could be higher or lower, and if the freezing point is too high, you could blow a freeze plug or crack your engine block. This also is dependent on your climate. If you're in a warmer climate, it's not as crucial. But this coolant right here is good for negative 35 degrees, which we will probably never see that temperature here. If your gauge is reading near zero or in the positives, you're going to want to add more coolant. Don't put any water in or a 50-50 mix, simply add more coolant to lower the freezing point. But this also is determined by your climate. If you're in a warmer climate, you might not need to worry, but if you're in Pennsylvania like us, where it can get down to negative 10, negative 15, you're going to want to make sure the coolant will not freeze. Now that we know our coolant is good and we have enough, we can move on to the next step. Now that we have the correct mixture and amount of coolant, if you're driving an older vehicle, it's probably a good idea to change the thermostat if it hasn't been changed in a while. It can get stuck open, and if it does, your car won't heat up and you won't have heat inside the car. Since we're in this corner of the car, we're going to go ahead and add some de-icer washer fluid. It's a really good idea to get de-icer washer fluid so it melts the ice on the windshield, obviously. But you could have some leftover washer fluid from the summer, which could have a freezing point above 32 degrees. So you want to make sure you get rid of all that so it doesn't freeze, and add some de-icer so you can melt the windshield. This particular fluid that we're going to add is good for negative 25 degrees. So it's a pretty good de-icer, but your average blue fluid is only good for negative 20, and your average bug washer fluid is only good for about 32 degrees. Since we're on the topic of fluids, not only is it a good idea to check your oil, but it's also a good idea to change the oil. If your oil is getting old, it's going to be thicker and harder to circulate through the engine when it's cold. And when you change your oil, make sure you check the owner's manual so you're adding the correct oil. Some owner's manuals recommend a thinner oil in the winter so it circulates better. While we're under the hood, you're going to want to make sure your battery is in good health. If you don't have a tester, you can take it to your local auto parts store and they'll test it for you to make sure it doesn't leave you stranded. While we're on the subject of batteries, jumper cables are nice to have, but if you break down alone, they can leave you stranded. I would recommend getting a portable jump starter like one of these. These are both very good options and they will not leave you stranded. They are an absolute lifesaver. Now let's talk about tires. If you're going to be driving a Mustang in the snow, I would seriously recommend a good set of snow tires, at least a really good set of all-season tires. But if you can't afford those, I'm going to show you how to check your tires to make sure they're within spec. We're going to measure our tread to make sure they're within spec. They're pretty new, so I'm pretty sure they're good, but we're going to check them just in case. I'm using this tire tread depth gauge. And as you can see, our tread is about 6 30-seconds, which is more than enough tread. But if you only have 2 30-seconds or less, I would highly recommend replacing your tires or you're going to have a really bad time in the snow. If you don't have a tire tread depth gauge like this, here's a simple trick. Take a penny and flip it upside down and put Abe Lincoln's head right in the tread. And if the tread is below his head, if it does not cover up any of his hair or head, you need to replace your tires. His hair is right at about 2 30-seconds. We're now going to check the tire tread depth with this penny. As you can see, his head goes well below the tread. But if the tread only came up to about there on his head, you're going to want to replace the tires. That's about 2 30-seconds right there. So we know our tire tread is good. Now we're going to make sure the pressure's good. Now when the temperature gets colder, the air gets denser and the pressure will drop, so you want to make sure you have adequate pressure in the tire. We're at right about 35, 36 PSI, which is pretty good. You want to make sure you check the owner's manual and find out what the correct pressure is supposed to be. I think this car is actually supposed to be 32, so we can actually just lose a little bit. And then this will compensate a little bit for the cold. The pressure's at 35 right now, but when it gets colder, it's certainly going to drop. So this is good pressure for right now. I'm sure some or most of you have experienced this at least one time in your life. You come out to your car, it's either covered in snow or covered in ice, you unlock it, and you can pull the door handle, but the door will not open. It moves a little bit, but it just won't open. What happened is moisture got on the weather stripping all around the door and froze to the door, and we're going to show you how to combat that. Simply open up the door and grab yourself a paper towel, a rag, whatever, and spray some WD-40 on it. Then wipe the WD-40 on the weather stripping. WD-40 repels water, so this will help prevent moisture and ice from forming on the weather stripping, freezing to the door. It's not 100% guaranteed, but it will certainly help. It's also not a bad idea to do the trunk seal as well. While you're in the trunk area, I would also recommend getting yourself an emergency pack. Maybe a little box with a blanket, hand warmers, an ice scraper, mini shovel, and also some kitty litter. These Mustangs need some weight in the rear, and the kitty litter will help with weight to get traction, but also if you get stuck in the snow, you can put it on the tires to gain traction. If you do get stuck in the snow and you run out of kitty litter or don't have any kitty litter to put right here to gain traction, if you have a floor mat, stick your floor mat right there against the tire, and if it bites, it'll help you get out of the rut. Obviously, this is a different car, but now we're going to be talking about ice and specifically how to keep ice off the windshield. One thing I highly suggest investing in, they're absolutely great products, are frost shields you can put across the windshield, but if you don't want to buy one, I'm going to show you how to make your own. So I've got a very big trash bag here, but it's still not quite long enough for what I want to do. So I'm going to cut down the sides right here and make this twice as long, and then I'm going to wrap it through the doors to cover the windshield and hold it in place. Open up the driver's side door. Wrap this around the A-pillar and close it inside the door. Open up the passenger door. And then since we made this twice as long, you can trim it. Now this doesn't completely cover the windshield because we had to make that cut. I would recommend actually buying one of these instead of making your own. But if you don't want to buy your own, this is an easy solution how to do it. It'll keep the snow and frost off. And once it snows, all you have to do is open up the door and you can roll this over, and then it'll take the snow with it and it'll be much easier to clean the windshield. I have another solution to prevent ice buildup on the windshield. Grab yourself a spray bottle and then mix 3 parts of vinegar per 1 part of water in the spray bottle and then spray it onto the windshield, and it'll help prevent ice buildup. I've already got some water in this bottle, so just mix 3 parts of white vinegar with 1 part of water. Then you're going to mix it up pretty good and then spray it onto the windshield. But before you spray it on, make sure you don't get this on the paint or any decals. This can damage them, so if you get the spray on some decals or paint, wipe it off immediately, but you just want to get it on the glass. Then you can let this sit overnight and it will help prevent ice buildup. This is apparently a very common thing up in Alaska. Then if you do come out to your car in the morning and there is frost on the windshield and frost on the mirrors and you don't want to scrape it off, I have another quick and easy solution for you. Grab yourself some rubbing alcohol and some water and make a 50-50 solution of rubbing alcohol and water and spray it on the ice and it'll melt it. It's probably not going to melt super thick ice, but if you have some frost in the windshield and the mirrors, it'll definitely take it off. While we're messing with the windshield, you want to make sure your wipers are working good. You don't want to find out if they're not working well when you're in the middle of a snowstorm. If you notice any major streaking, it's probably a good idea to replace the wipers. In our case, no major streaking, they seem pretty good. Now this is for those people that might not have a key fob to unlock their car. To prevent your lock from icing up, grab some WD-40, stick the straw in there, fill the lock with some WD-40, and use the key and work it in. It will displace water and help prevent icing up, and might save you from ruining your morning. However, in the event if your lock does ice up, you can grab yourself some de-icer. This is specifically meant to de-ice locks. It's got a nice insert. Put it on the lock right there, give it a pump, and it sprays the mixture in there to melt the ice. Now, you don't want to store this inside your car. If you store this in the car and you can't get in, it doesn't do you much good, so keep this in your house and not in your car. This is probably the most important thing that you want to check. You want to make sure your exhaust doesn't have any exhaust leaks at all. Make sure all your clamps are tight, there's no holes, nothing's loose. If you do have an exhaust leak and you're sitting in your car trying to warm up or you're stranded, you really could die. Carbon monoxide is very toxic and it could kill you if you have an exhaust leak. The final thing that I would recommend is when you get in your car and have it warm up, don't turn the fan all the way high like some people do. If you're going to let the car warm up, have the fan all the way low or completely off. If you have the fan on high, all it's going to do is blow cold air on you and make you feel colder, and it's going to take longer for the car to warm up. If you have the fan blowing, it's going to extract heat from the heater core and cool it and not let it warm up faster. So leave the fan off or very low and it will warm up quicker. Well, there you go. That's how you winterize your Mustang, whether you're going to drive it or store it. If you have any other tips, tricks, or recommendations, leave them in the comments below, and we'll see you next time.